Welcome to the sage verse, with real works and true words. Patterns of recognition leave your brain converged. Time is irrelevant when the thoughts of impediment corrupt your soul with mind-numbing nemesis. The sage's way is where the truth hits the page. Turn your soul into a library in the name of knowledge and discovery. We seek out reality to be gone of human apathy. Welcome to the sage verse, where we explore the pressing questions of our age. My name's Jason, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine and fellow founder of the channel, Hermes. How are we doing today, man?
Very well, thank you, Jason. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. So, it's your topic today. What are we going to be discussing?
So I thought it would be a good discussion to talk about what it means to love yourself. Because we hear, that float around a lot, especially nowadays, love yourself, love yourself. And if you take it back, there's many kind of philosophies, many spiritual teachings that kind of go into that. So I thought it would be an interesting discussion to talk about what that actually means. So what comes to your mind initially with that?
Yeah, interesting one. Definitely different from what we usually talk about. So what springs to my mind at the beginning, I suppose, to take care of your body, take care of your mind, self-care. And that can manifest itself in different ways. A form of that could be going to the gym and getting regular exercise, or taking time away from your activities, from your social demands, and kind of restoring that inner peace that you need in solitude.
Yeah.
That could be a way for self-care or self-love, but also just from the standpoint of self-love, I think it's believing in yourself and trusting yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then no one else is going to believe in you. But there's that fine line between self-love and narcissism or delusion, to the point where you are, you're not viewing yourself with reason anymore. You're kind of putting yourself above what you should be, and I think that is fundamentally not ideal. There has to be a level of reality to refer back to. So you should always be honest with yourself when it comes to loving yourself, but at the same time not be afraid of facing those aspects of your character that perhaps need to change, and not necessarily criticizing those aspects, but viewing them in an optimistic and, I was going to say hopeful there, but not necessarily hopeful, just having a degree of acceptance, but also understanding what you can control and what you can change.
Yeah.
And then putting forward the steps to enable that, I suppose.
Yeah, very well said. And yeah, there is definitely a level of narcissism that is often used to explain what self-love is. And I think there is true self-love and then there is narcissism. I think they're not one and the same. And I'm going to start off my kind of explanation what I think self-love is with a quote. So if you love yourself, you love others. If you hate yourself, you hate others. Because in relationship with others, the other is nothing but a mirror. That's a quote by Osho. And I think that's very true. Often we are given an ultimatum between living a selfish life or a selfless life. And, I think modern society presents usually the selfish life. And I think religion tends to offer the selfless life, living in service of others. And it often does paint that idea that if you love and give to yourself, then you are a selfish person, which has a negative connotation on it as well. But I think one of those things can't really exist with the other. As Osho said, if you love yourself, you love others. If you hate yourself, you hate others. Because how can you give that which you don't have within you? How can
100%?
It also says, give to others when your cup runneth over. You have to fill your own well in order for your cup to runneth over. If you're in an airplane, They always say secure your own mask first before you help others. If you instantly go to try and help others where you don't have air, you're not going to be able to help yourself. You're not going to be able to help others. So that's what I think self-love is. It's giving to yourself to make sure you're in a good enough state to be of service to others. And yeah, mentioning
That's
narcissism,
yeah.
there's also another
Mm,
Osho quote, because the word narcissism comes from Narcissus, which was an
yeah.
ancient Greek teaching where he fell in love with his own reflection. And yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
Osho talks about this parable. So he says Narcissus fell in love with his own reflection, not with himself. That is not true self-love. He fell in love with the reflection. The reflection is the other. He became two. He became divided. Narcissus was split. He was in a kind of schizophrenia. He became two, the lover and the loved. He became his own object of love. And that's what happens to so many people who think they are in love. So what's
Yeah,
your
it's the
reaction to
idea
that
of love.
quote?
I
Mm.
suppose it's the idea of love or idea of what that could be, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
When
Because a lot of
When
people,
Narcissus is looking into the reflection.
a lot of people
Um,
do have a narcissistic self-love, which is just looking in the mirror, like, how do I look? Fixing their hair, looking at their outfit. That's their idea of what self-love is, but it's not. You're objectifying yourself. You're seeing yourself as just the aesthetic. That's all you have to offer
and you're
with the
pairing
world.
yourself to yeah, you're pairing yourself to a standard that you wish to keep, and that standard may not be true anyway,
And the ego lives in
or
comparison with
realistic.
others.
The ego certainly does, but
Mm.
comparing oneself to others is often a futile endeavor anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the idea, just to fall back there on the idea of you can only love others when you love yourself, that is
Mm-hmm.
very true. Because if you don't love yourself, then, like you said, you have nothing to give to anyone else. So loving yourself is not narcissism at all. I think there's a confusion there.
Mm-hmm.
There's loving yourself with regards to having respect for yourself, having
Mm-hmm.
respect for your boundaries, having
Mm.
respect for your time,
Yeah.
having respect for things that are valuable and are essential for keeping your body and mind healthy. Because if you're not healthy, like you said, if you're not in the optimal condition to help others, then you're not of use to anyone in any positive way. So keeping yourself checked and self in line with what is healthy, I think is 100% a form of self-love.
Mm-hmm.
And also to accept the parts of you that perhaps you find difficult accepting, and those that are beyond change. It's not like, I'm just going to smother them with love and this kind of foolish, naive, nonsensical kind of love, which
Mm-hmm.
is not reasoned with. Find a reason to accept that which cannot be changed, which is fundamentally understandable and something that you can accept on your own terms. And the truth often hurts, right? So if there are things that you can't change about yourself that you particularly don't like, life is about finding acceptance in those things, and that acceptance is a form of self-love, in my opinion.
Mm.
And that falls
Absolutely.
in line, because by accepting oneself, you are then nourishing your mental.
Mm-hmm.
You're bringing back that peace and fighting off the parasites of the mind, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
which are just negative statements and mutters that the mind likes to produce to put oneself down, and that's anti-self-love at that point.
Yeah.
So
Self-hatred. Yeah.
self-love is almost self-hatred. Self-love is self-acceptance, I would say.
Took the words
Accepting
right on my mouth.
yourself.
I was gonna just go into self-acceptance. That is exactly what self-love is. It's accepting who you are. It's feeling comfortable in one's own skin. And often from a young age, we are subjected to criticism, ridicule, and there are certain shame, guilt, things like that. And sometimes there are fragmentations in which we reject aspects of ourselves. If you look at my tattoo here, I don't know how well you can
Mm.
see it on camera, but this is a Chinese saying, which is embrace tiger, return to mountain. And I have a tiger, and I have this is called the Golden Summit, which is at the top of Mount Wudang. But that saying, "Embrace tiger, return to mountain," is similar to what Jung called shadow work. It is basically accepting the darker aspects of yourself. Embrace tiger, it's embracing your animalistic nature, your, all aspects of yourself, the light and the dark. Return to mountain is return to wholeness. So that is the work of true self-love. People think it's easy just, to say I love myself, but it's actually what a true self-love is to me. It's loving the darkest aspects of yourself. It's like, going back to the past moments in which you might have been shamed or felt trauma or were insecure about certain things, and it's reconnecting all those fragmented parts of yourself into
Mm.
one whole. It's like having full self-love, full self-acceptance, and that's not an easy thing to do. That's a lifetime of work. That is also the path of becoming the sage. And you know you see that people who do have a level of self-acceptance and self-love do have certain boundaries and things in which they will accept, and people who have low self-esteem and low self-worth
Mm.
usually will accept a lot more. And on that path, because a lot of people are interested in finding kind of their soulmate, or what they would call a life partner, someone that they love. I think it does start first with that mastering of loving yourself. If you see it like a pyramid, and like a self-worth pyramid, at the bottom are the people who do not love themselves, are very insecure. There's a lot more they will stand for in a relationship. There's a lot more people they would accept an abuser, they would accept someone that isn't compatible with themselves. And then the higher they go in knowing themselves, loving themselves, accepting themselves, the more boundaries you're going to have to naturally put up, because you wouldn't accept the abuser, you wouldn't accept someone that oversteps your boundary. And I think the higher you go in that, though
Mm-hmm.
you find less and less mates, you will know yourself to the extent you will know who your soulmate is as well, or you will know who you're most compatible with.
I 100% agree with you there. And in fact, I thought about this before. Well, especially the idea of insecurity. And I think that insecurity is really a lack of knowledge of oneself,
Mm-hmm.
and then that translates to a lack of acceptance, lack of self-acceptance. Think about someone who is secure in who they are. In my opinion, that translates to an individual that knows themselves or understands the truth of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes the dark and the light. That includes the parts of their character they do not like, but they come to acceptance. Whereas those who are insecure fundamentally don't know how they are perceived.
Mm-hmm.
They lack the knowledge, and therefore that lack of knowledge is a fear of the unknown. So the fear of the unknown is what, in my opinion, breeds a sense of insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas those who have a sense of security in who they are, their character, their looks, their personality, their finances, they have a certain degree of knowledge and expectation of what they believe themselves to be. And that is comforting, and that is what provides security and self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
So that lack of knowledge, or the absence of it, essentially doesn't allow for any self-acceptance, because how do you know what to accept if you're lacking that crucial information?
Mm.
So insecurity is, in my opinion, a lack of understanding of
I
oneself.
think,
And that's why the Greeks always said, know thyself.
yeah,
That's why the
absolutely.
philosophy of antiquity and of the present is always, revolved around that fundamental question.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I?
Well, as I've said before, the ancient mystery schools in which Plato was a member, Aristotle, Socrates, the ancient mystery schools was an ancient
Mm.
society that held on to these esoteric philosophical teachings when they weren't accepted in modern society. And it said that above every door where you would walk into a mystery school, it would say, know thyself. It is an important part of gaining on the path to becoming a sage. It's important to know and look at yourself, and because how can you master yourself, master that which you don't know, as you said, and how can you love yourself if you don't know yourself? And a lot of people, I would say, don't know themselves and actually don't want to know themselves. If you look around modern society, I think the obsession with celebrity, for example, is because people don't want to look at their own life. They idolize, and you can only naturally
It's
do
very
that
true.
when you don't focus internally. There's only one other way to look, which is externally. You're going to find other people to idolize. You're going to
Hmm.
energize these normal human beings who are exactly on the same level as us. They might have cultivated to a level where they're very creative, or but you could do that as well. And the reason there's such an obsession with celebrities because there's such a neglection of ourselves, and so many people that want to neglect themselves. They don't want to look at their own lives because it's
As
like,
exactly.
yeah, go on.
Sorry. Be a witness of oneself, not of others.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's like stepping into a messy room if you haven't done it for a long time. Something you want to just sweep under the carpet. There's a lot of mess in there, and it's easier to just numb yourself with technological use, or, mindless entertainment just to shut yourself down. But, I would say step into the messy room of your own life, just one thing at a time. Put away the sock, look at, the mess that you've made, understand how it came about, and begin reordering your own life. That is the path to self mastery. That is the path to knowing yourself. And then eventually that is the path to loving yourself.
Yeah, of course, there are different personalities out there and not everyone is perfectly organized. I know for one myself, I'm not the most organized individual, but where I lack in organization, I make up for in adapting to my environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that as the strength. So for me, it's all about being mindful of what my weaknesses are
Mm-hmm.
and leveraging my strengths. Because we are not all perfectly balanced individuals.
Agreed.
That is a facade that we like to claim,
And
and
if you're
often we
not, that
fight.
that loving and accepting of yourself for being that way is also self love,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, for me, when it comes to a messy desk, there's a difference between, I think, mess and, dirt, which is the one that we need to remove. Because the way some people's minds work, I know for certain mine, I'm quite scatterbrained in terms of how I think.
Mm-hmm.
Ideas are relatable. That's kind of how I've always thought. So for me, a desk that is a little bit cluttered is almost a reflection of what's going on in my mind. But that chaos is something that I embrace and need in order to find opportunity and find what I want to focus on. But I know that for others, a desk that is pristine is the only way that they can work. They're working in that chaos is not something that they'd be able to do. But within a clean slate, it allows them to, carry out those tasks that they want to do. Whereas for me, and again, I remember my ex-boss when I was young, when I was about 16.
Mm-hmm.
His desk was an absolute minefield, cluttered with documents everywhere. But the man was working on big ideas that he didn't have time to deal with what was around him.
Mm-hmm.
So what looked like absolute chaos to him was trivia. It was trivial things that did not in any shape or form impact what he was able to work on. And on top of that, we all have maybe flaws or aspects of our character that we overlook and we don't see as essential.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps that's something where we need to be mindful of, so we don't let those dark aspects of our character, impact the light parts. Because it's finding that balance. Finding that balance is obviously the objective of the sage, right?
Mm-hmm.
The objective of trying to find peace. But finding that is juggling, two sides of your character that oppose each other. So how do you manage that?
Mm-hmm.
It's a difficult question, but accepting that is the first step into being mindful of what it
No,
is.
for sure. And it's not an easy path. I'll tell you this from the beginning. Like Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. It's not easy to look at those aspects of yourself you don't want to look at. It's easier to neglect them. It's easier to keep them in the shadows and, blindly or mindlessly entertain yourself or focus on other people's lives in order to, keep that voice silent. But, it's Carl Jung who coined the phrase shadow work, and the shadows exist if we neglect those parts of ourselves. It's like the light of our own consciousness, we focus only on the positive aspects of ourselves. Like on social media, for example, you show the positive highlight reel of your own life, and only you know the shadows that exist, what you get up to when no one else is looking, no one else is around.
100%.
And the anxiety and depression and the negative self-talk, all of that exists within the shadows, and it will only ever grow the longer and longer you neglect it. Shadow work is, bravely marching into those shadows, marching into that darkness to face your own demons. Like, that's what it is. And eventually what you'll find, if you look at that darkness for long enough, it will transmute into light. It will come back to the light of your consciousness. You will realize, and find peace with your inner child who went through past experiences in which you felt shame, you felt guilt, you felt the need to fragment aspects of yourself. It's about bringing those aspects back. There's no part of you that is ugly. There's only life experience. And if anything, when you relate to others with certain things you would have never spoken about before, you realize you made it a bigger thing than it actually was. You can actually relate to other people's pain and help other people, and other people can actually help you when you reach out. But to keep things in the shadows is when you'll be tortured, is when you'll continue suffering. So it's actually, even though it's a difficult thing to do, I encourage the viewers to definitely go on this path, though it is the most terrifying thing to do. Follow that path of self-love, follow that path of self-acceptance, and look into your own life. If you don't know where to begin, I'd always recommend therapy. I don't think you just need to be having a mental breakdown to be doing therapy, just like you don't need to reach obesity to go to the gym. Take your mental health seriously. A therapist is just like a personal trainer for the mind. And it's something that can definitely help.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. For sure. Looking after our mind and looking after our body is the same thing. Our body is a temple, and our mind is, a part of that. So we can't escape the reality that we have in our mind. Escaping the mind is what we try to do, and those are the shadows on the wall, so to speak. The entertainment, the things that allow us to let the dark side of our characters take a back seat, which is never ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that shadow work, doing the internal work, and marching into the darkness without knowledge of what could be there, or knowing what is there and fearing away from it, it seems to be the case. Because you have a brief understanding of what it could be that you need to deal with, but you lack the courage in order to go there really and deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially tearing away the parasites of the mind, the things that, you don't even know if they're reasonable doubts that you have there. There could be, there's still work that needs to be done in deciphering what's real and what's not real. That's why, you mentioned therapy there. I think a lot of the theory that underpins that is CBT.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is firstly understanding what is true. Because as Seneca said, we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. And therefore going into the shadow allows us to find out what is true.
Mm-hmm.
And find out whether the doubts that we had or the parasites that existed were truly parasites, in the sense that the doubts or the fears were reasonable doubts.
Mm-hmm.
There was a level of trauma that existed that was reflected in the physical reality. And so my responses were just mere true reflections. And that is, hard trauma that you have to come to acceptance. But then I think that there's that other side, which is those aspects where perhaps we reacted where we shouldn't have reacted, or we had unreasonable fears or unreasonable worries, which, going into the shadow and deciphering whether or not they were, for the most part, actually occurring, can really help. And I think that will bring a level of peace as well. Because, as Seneca said, we suffer more in our imagination than reality.
So
Once
true.
we realize this phenomena and we start to think, wait, why am I worrying about something that doesn't even matter?
Mm-hmm.
This has no bearing on my life. This doesn't impact me at all. So why am I providing so much attention to this matter? Obviously, there are things that change us. maybe you go through an experience, a traumatic experience that is, intimately real, and that changes us. And that's an even more frightening path to go down. And that's a far longer process, because you're dealing with true events that ultimately moved who you are, maybe changed your character in some way. So finding oneself again is battling that demon on our however many demons they might be. And there's no real answer to what the outcome is that, but courage is certainly a prerequisite or an ultimate discovery in the process.
No, for sure.
Right.
You said it there. It exists within trauma. Like if you're talking about physical trauma, for example, if you were in a car accident or something like that, then often you'll find it very uncomfortable. Some people that were in car accidents never want to drive again, and that is because of the fears, like the fear of what you've created. You've moved that into the shadows, and you no longer want to face it. And sometimes you'll see, even when they're in a car, they'll jump, and they'll have certain triggers that come up, and that's because trauma exists within the body, just as emotional trauma exists within the emotional body. And unless you face it, unless you target it, go back to those moments, find peace within those moments of these moments of trauma in your past, you're never going to truly live and be at peace. And they only seem powerful. Our demons only seem powerful because they are in the shadows. And it's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of not
That's
wanting to
very
look
true.
at them. And they seem to get bigger and scarier the longer you neglect them. But if you actually shine the light of your consciousness onto these shadows, you realize, you'll see just a scared child. And that's your inner child who went through these things. And you are now the more conscious being that can kind of bring peace to those past events that happen, reframe them, re-understand them. Don't just leave them there neglected, because they don't go away unless you focus on them. And if you look at my t-shirt here, I don't know if you can see it, but it's Naruto. I don't know if anyone is an anime fan, but there's
Yeah.
a really good scene in Naruto in which he's trying to become, or master himself to that next level, and he's training with a sage, and he essentially is instructed to go to the waterfall of truth and face his greatest adversary. And when he's sitting there, he's meditating by this waterfall of truth, and who he's faced with is the dark version of himself, who hates everyone within his village, who neglected him as a child because they were scared of him due to other reasons. If you want to watch it, you can kind of go deeper into it. But he thought that he had to defeat and fight himself, like fight his inner demons, and he was equally matched in every way because he was facing himself. He realized in the end he actually had to love
Just
himself.
tearing his body apart.
He had to essentially embrace the tiger, return to the mountain. He ended up giving himself a hug and telling himself it's going to be okay. And that's when there was like a transmutation that happened, and the two fragmented pieces came back together, and he became more powerful. So it was really interesting. It's a lot of anime. Japanese are very philosophical. They usually base it on certain philosophies and things like that. So I thought I'd throw that in there for the anime fans that are watching.
Yeah, no, that was a pretty cool metaphor. I suppose it is a metaphor for the journey of knowing thyself, or the journey of the sage's way, right? Is really the inquiry into oneself, and that encapsulates all different things, from self-knowledge to what am I capable of, to what am I scared of. This is all a part of the journey of a sage. So yeah.
Well said, Jason. I think we'll wrap it up there. We covered quite a lot. It was a really, really good discussion. Is there anything you wanted to finish off with?
No, I thought that was, a pretty interesting discussion. It's good to hear your perspective on the matter.
Yeah, yours too.
But yeah.
Thank you for everyone that listened. And if you are not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you can continue on this path, the Sage's Way, with us. And if you could just like the video, we would really appreciate it. It helps us with the algorithm, helps other people see our content. And share with your friends, share with your family. That's pretty much it. Peace out.
Peace.
Welcome to the Sageverse. Please just observe the birth of this creative surge for the purpose to leave hatred purged and replaced with words that will make you learn to take your place on earth. And once you've taken your place and found your greatest of traits, cultivated the day, this will be making you say, this is the sage's way.